Is a absolutely fantastic pleasure to chair the Parks Lecture. I've had this honour as the Vice President of Research and Enterprise on a number of occasions, and it always is a pleasure. We have the most fantastic speakers covering a very wide range of topics within Parks' remit of Jewish, non-Jewish relations. And the Parks Institute is a very special part of the University of Southampton, and the Parks Lecture is particularly special within that. So it really is an honour for me. But we are here tonight in honour of the Reverend Dr. James Parks, who is the inspiration behind the Parks Institute for the study of Jewish, non-Jewish relations. James Parks lived from 1896 to 1981 and was one of the most remarkable figures within the 20th century Christianity. He was ordained by the Church of England in 1926. He campaigned against the rise of racist nationalism in Europe as early as the 1920s, especially through his work with the International Student Service and the Student Christian Movement. He was a tireless fighter against anti-Semitism in all forms, including from within Christianity. He helped rescue Jewish refugees during the 1930s and campaigned for the Jews of Europe during the Holocaust. During the Second World War, he helped found the Council of Christians and Jews and worked throughout his career in promoting religious tolerance and mutual respect between those of all faiths and those with none. Parks wanted to donate his library to a university so that future generations could develop his research, and a home was found for his materials at the University of Southampton in 1964. After over 50 years of growth and development, the Parks Institute as a community of scholars, archivists, librarians, students and fellows has come a long way towards realising the vision of James Parks. On the academic side, the Institute consists of academic members whose expertise covers antiquity to the 21st century and is wide-ranging in geographical scope. Amongst the specialised interests of its current members are the study of the ancient world, migration, maritime studies, Eastern Europe, Holocaust studies, heritage and cultural history. The Parks Institute has been described as a key distinctor of international performance at the University of Southampton. It could have been by me. I was previously the PVC International, in recognition of its contributions to research, teaching and public engagement in the field of the relations between Jews and non-Jews and Jewish identity and culture more broadly. The success of the Parks Institute reflects not only the commitment of its dedicated staff and the wider support of the University of Southampton, which we're very glad to provide, but also partnerships with a wide range of organisations outside Southampton. Generous donations, particularly from the Ian Carton Charitable Trust, continue to make the work of the Institute possible. The Institute has gained support for its research from a wide range of national and international funding bodies, including for its 3 scholarly journals, Jewish Culture and History, Patterns of Prejudice, and Holocaust Studies. We're especially proud of the Institute's work in public engagement, which brings our expertise to many in the community, including in schools and colleges, in adult education, and also through public events and arts and culture initiatives. The Institute has also swiftly adjusted to the digital world and is offering online resources, including tonight, and hybrid access to most of its events. The Parks Institute offers students a unique range of study in the field of Jewish, non-Jewish relations, and of course the Institute introduces students to the wonderful holdings of the Parks Library and Jewish archive collections held at the Hartley Library. We're excited to be able to launch a new postgraduate programme, the MA Holocaust, History, Experience, Heritage, in October, and train the next generation of scholars and heritage specialists in the field of Jewish history and culture. Many colleagues, partner organisations and friends and donors contribute to the work and achievements of the Parks Institute, but it is always good to be able to recognise the excellent work done by our students, which brings me to the Moss and Cesarini prizes for 2022-23. Moss Memorial Prizes are offered each year in memory of Stephen Moss and his mother Daphne. Stephen was a student here at Southampton, and Daphne was president of the Society of Women Writers and Journalists. We are grateful to the generosity of the Moss family, who with support from the Society of Women Writers and Journalists established these prizes to be awarded annually for the best essay on a Jewish, non-Jewish related topic, in both an undergraduate and a postgraduate category. The 3 winning students of this year's Moss Prize are here tonight, although I think we've just established one is on Zoom, as is Mrs. Elizabeth Moss, who will present the prizes. So please could I ask Elizabeth to come and join me and Claire up there. Elizabeth.
Thank you. I'd just like to say a few words. It gives me great pleasure to return to Southampton again to present the Moss Prizes. My late husband, Steve, and I attended the university back in the 1970s, rather longer than I care to admit to, although in some respects it seems like yesterday. We studied law, and the grounding we got enabled us to go on to pursue successful careers in the legal profession. We also forged a great many friendships which endure to this day. Tragically, my husband died suddenly at the cruelly young age of 46. After his death, as you've just heard, my father-in-law, Sydney, decided to endow the Parkes Institute with funds to enable the award of initially 2 prizes in memory of Steve and his mother, who was a short story writer. My late husband's family are Jewish, and I'm a Gentile. I suppose you could say a shiksa. So it seemed appropriate for my father-in-law to endow the Parkes Institute for the study of Jewish, non-Jewish relations. So without further ado, please can the prize winners come forward?
Right, I think I get to announce who they are. The first prize for Best Undergraduate Essay goes to Grace Muse, a second-year history student at the time she wrote her essay, for her essay entitled, "Were the organisations set up and actions taken by the established Anglo-Jewish community to deal with immigrants concerned with social control, or were they motivated by altruism and religious ethnic solidarity?" Can I ask Grace to join us?
Congratulations.
The second prize for undergraduate essay goes to Martha Luke, third-year English student at the time, whose essay entitled "A Disturbing Liminality, How Brutality in Murawski's This Way for the Gas, Ladies and Gentlemen, is created by his use of liminal narrative techniques and presentation of the camp's obscure grey zone morality." I ask Martha to come forward. Right, there we are. Excellent.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And on Zoom, just to cue that up, the postgraduate award goes to Jack Tanton, who's taking an MA in history, for his essay entitled "What Does Paul's Epistle to the Romans, especially chapter 9, suggest about his view of the Roman and the Jewish law in proto-Christianity?" Jack, I don't know how we do this, but do give us a wave, and Liz will smile at you or something like that. So congratulations.
Your envelope with your certificate.
Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Elizabeth, and many congratulations to the 3 prize winners and to the colleagues who taught them, particularly Tony Kushner, James Jordan, Deborah Baum, and Helen Sperling. I just need to get, there's cognitive dissonance here. So I would now like to call upon Dawn Waterman, who is with us. Great, yes. It was, I think you are probably going to do this. Okay. We would now like to award the David Cesarani, sorry, excuse me, dissertation prize in memory of Dawn's late husband. Sure. I don't know if you want to say anything.
Well, just to say how delighted I am to be here. David's colleagues, friends, and how lovely it is. Patrick, I hear it's an absolute cracker of a dissertation, so well done.
Right. Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I need to be my bit. So Patrick Parkosh, for his dissertation on Jewish life in Tarnow, 1935 to 48, written under the supervision of Neil Gregor. So Patrick, are you with us? Yes. Thank you.
Well done. It's really good.
And I'd also like just to take this opportunity to mention the winners of last year who could not receive their prizes because the Parkes lecture was unfortunately cancelled. And that's Keris McHugh, excuse me, Maddie Elch, Alistair Wakelin, who won the Moss Prizes, and Jack Tanton. Is that right? Did you win it too? No.
Yeah, he won it also last year, but he won the. I mean, he's very good.
Well, clearly, Jack's brilliant. So
Prize
he
last
won the
year.
César.
This year.
Well done again, Jack. Right. To the business of the evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Parks Lecture is one of the keynote events in the yearly Parks Institute seminar series. Our speaker tonight is Howard Jacobson, who will be in conversation with Professor Bryan Cheyette. Howard Jacobson, as I'm sure everyone here will know, is a British novelist, essayist, and broadcaster who was born in Manchester, is the author of 17 novels and several works of non-fiction. The Mighty Waltzer, about a teenage table tennis champion, won the Bollinger Everyman Woodhouse Prize for comic writing. He would later win the prize again for Zoo Time. His next novel, Who's Sorry Now, was the first of 4 of his novels to be longlisted for the Man Booker Prize, followed by Kaluki Nights, and he was awarded the Man Booker Prize for the Finkler Question in 2010. His novel Jay was shortlisted for the award in 2014. He is an honorary fellow of Downing College, Cambridge, and visiting professor at New College of the Humanities, part of Northeastern University, London. Bryan Cheyette is soon to be the emeritus professor in modern literature and culture at the University of Reading. He has published 11 books himself, most recently Diasporas of the Mind, Jewish and Post-Colonial Writing and the Nightmare of History, published by Yale University Press in 2014, and The Ghetto, a very short introduction, Oxford University Press in 2020. He is a series editor for Bloomsbury, New Horizons in Contemporary Writing. Most importantly, is a visiting fellow of the Parks Institute, University of Southampton, where he taught for a period not that long ago. He has been writing on Howard Jacobson's fiction since 1984. I'm very looking forward to the conversation. Howard, Bryan, over to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, this is going to be an evening of serial introductions, but I've just cut mine right down. And as we've just heard, Howard Jacobson has been a leading Jewish writer in Britain for nearly 4 decades, and perhaps more importantly, the leading writer of comic fiction in Britain. I interviewed Howard first of all in 1984 after the publication of his first 2 glorious novels, Coming From Behind and Peeping Tom. And I've been reading and writing on him ever since. It's my great honor to hold a conversation with Howard once again for the Parks Institute. He remains at the height of his powers with the publication last year of his memoir, Mother's Boy, A Writer's Beginnings, which he's kindly agreed to read from. Thanks so much, Howard.
Thank you, Bryan. I will read a little from this, but can I just say I feel indebted to you because you've been writing about me for forever, really, or my ever anyway. In fact, you've been writing about me for so long that I feel you must have been writing about me before I wrote anything. Was it really only in 1980? Are you sure you didn't do something on my as yet to be published novel in 19?
There was a lot of talk about your as yet to be published novel, a lot of talk about being a novelist without writing a novel.
Yeah. And it could easily have stayed like that.
It could easily have stayed.
So your support in those will stop this schmoozing. But just nice to say it in a public place that your support in those lonely, terrifying, sad years when you don't feel anybody's reading you is much supported. Well, still is.
Well, thank you so much. And I think we all felt at the time very isolated. And thankfully things have changed enormously, as we can see.
Yeah. Yeah, they've changed. Though someone did say recently in The Guardian, commenting on the granters, Granter does this best of. I'm very kind of sore about Granter's best writers under 40 because its first list came out, it must have been 1983 as my first novel was coming out. And people said, are you on it? And I said, no. And I wasn't under 40. I was a very late starter, which is partly what this book is about. So that was my excuse that I couldn't have been. Yeah. But I don't think they'd have put me on it anyway. I don't think I was their taste. And I've watched these lists now, and now I feel kind of, I'm beyond all that, and it doesn't matter, and I'm not under any age that they could possibly make a list for. But I did see someone comment that sent a chill through me, that there are only 4 male writers out of the 20 picked this year. My wife says, stop complaining, you've had your turn. I'm still waiting for my turn. And it's just, and the Guardian went on to say, which proves if there's only 4 male writers on the list out of 20, it's not cool for a man to be a novelist anymore. So you see before you an extremely uncool novelist. I'll stand when I read this. It's self-explanatory. My mother died today. It is the 3rd of May, 2020. She is 97 years old. I have had premonitions of her dying for the last 70 of those years, on occasions hearing her calling my name in the night. But last night she was silent, and today she crept under the radar of my forebodings. Many are succumbing to COVID-19, but my mother hasn't died of any virus. 2 days ago, she complained of a bad pain in her head and fell almost immediately into unconsciousness. Quietly and unobtrusively, she drifts out of this world altogether. This was always her chosen way of going, without fuss or notice. I am upset that the pain she complained of was in her head. She feared for her head. I too, when I was small, feared for her head. As a young woman, she suffered migraines so badly that when she went to bed with her hands over her eyes, I was afraid she would not survive the night. Ours was a mental relationship. It was our heads that joined us. I dread dying with a pain in mine. We'd spoken on the phone for a few days before she died, and but for my having to repeat everything I said twice, 3 times if it was a joke, we'd had a good conversation. At the beginning of the year, when the virus was first mentioned, she had expressed surprise I was taking elaborate precautions. Oh, Howard, you aren't worrying about that, are you? As though she hadn't schooled me to prepare for the most apocalyptic eventualities. The day I left home to go to university, she reminded me to take enough toilet paper. What, for 3 years? Just until you settle in. I think Cambridge will have toilet paper, I said, but I took a roll just in case. Now is not the place to admit that I took rolls of toilet paper around the world with me for the next 40 years, but I'll mention it. Yet now that we really did have to contend with a calamity equal to her anxieties, she had turned perversely carefree. Oh, Howard, it was like having Mr. Micawber for a mother. 1 minute sunk in the deepest gloom, facing imminent catastrophe, the next sitting up on the back of a coach, cheerfully eating chestnuts out of a paper bag. Had she not been 97 and bedridden, I might have imagined her doing cartwheels. By the time of our final conversation, however, she had rethought and was back to her old apocalyptic self. It's going to kill us all, she said loudly. She said clearly, firmly, after which she moved on seamlessly to cheese. I'd been sending her gifts of mature cheddar cheese because we all like cheddar cheese in our family, ideally grilled on toast, and because she can't eat chocolates and doesn't much care for flowers. This cheddar cheese, I'd been sending her grills especially well, but I don't want you to send me any more, she insisted. It must be costing you a fortune. I told her I could just about afford the cheese. Her reasoning wasn't always easy to follow, but I thought I could see what led her to ask next how my book was going. Okay, what is it again? It's a memoir, Ma. What's it about? Me, Ma, what do you think? She sounded concerned. Is that a good idea? Probably not. What about you? About how I became a writer. You were always a writer. I know, but I was 40 before I wrote anything. So what was stopping you? That's one of the questions I'm asking in this memoir. But the short answer is being Jewish. Being Jewish. Oh no, Howard, you're not going to be horrible about Jews, are you? I hope not. After all, if it was being Jewish that held me back, It was being Jewish that got me going. I've said her reasoning took unexpected turns, but what she said next soared into the realms of the fantastical. She told me she loved me. I'm ashamed to say I roared with laughter. Ma, I said, that's not the kind of thing we say to each other. And it wasn't. Love talk was not us. Well, I do love you, she said. I should have known then that she was dying. I'd laughed, but I was overwhelmed by feelings I didn't recognize. I'm glad, I said. And then I plunged into the deep, dark chambers of the hitherto unexpressed. Because I love you. There. Said it. She nearly 100, I in my 70s, and we'd finally said that we loved each other. It astonishes me. What? That we said it, or that it had taken so long? Both.
That was wonderful, really wonderful, and moving to hear of the death of your mother at the splendid age of 97 while writing the memoir. Have you always felt that you are a novelist? Can you pin this feeling down to a particular age or event?
Well, everything has been a sort of a lie in my life. I think that's what makes you, if you are a writer, you are accustomed to lying. I don't know what comes first, the habit of lying, or as you write, you get accustomed to the fact that you check. Lying is not the right way to put it. You elaborate. I think of, I don't know whether any of you have seen that unspeakable adaptation of Great Expectations on television, that beyond all imagining. How you can make a dramatization, an adaptation of one of the world's funniest writer and not have anything in the slightest bit funny astonishes me, but they've managed it. But I only mention that because I think that's wonderful, that book about Pip's lies. When Pip goes to Miss Havisham and then they ask him, he goes back to the forge and they ask him what he saw there, it's just all, it makes it all up. It's full of lies. And you know that Pip is, that's the young Dickens, that's the Dickens, the writer. I think I exaggerated when I was a little boy. I think I liked exaggerating because it stopped adults in their tracks and I wanted to engage with them. I felt that I could engage with my mother's women friends, all of whom I thought were fantastically glamorous and exciting. I was about 2 at the time, but I was an early appreciator of Jewish women of a certain, well, all women, but particularly Jewish women of a certain age. So making things up was one of the ways that you engage the attention of people. Making things up is one of the ways that you change your life. And I wanted to change my life because I was dissatisfied with who I was, and I didn't like the world I was living in. You don't become a writer. Why would you become a novelist or indeed a painter why would you reinvent a world if you're happy with the world? If you live in a world that suits you, if you're a footballer or something, you don't change the world, you just move in it. I needed from an early age to live in a different world, a world in which maybe I was more comfortable, or a world in which I control. It's a very controlling thing to be a writer, and particularly to be a novelist. There you are, and you are a god when you're writing a novel. You are controlling things, even if you insist, as I do, that you're not really in control and the characters are inventing themselves. Nonetheless, there you are at the center of things. And that was what I wanted to do from a very early age. I fantasize when I say it felt as though I was born wanting to write. I don't remember when my mother said, my mother said, you were always a writer. I mean, she meant that. That was the family belief. Howard was always a writer. So where was as my father used to say, so where's this novel? Cruelly, year after year. So where's this novel? So how's this novel going again? And indeed, the final impulse to make myself write something, which was partly being stuck teaching English literature to students for business at Wolverhampton Polytechnic, that had a lot to do with forcing me into it. We had this conversation a long time ago, but it was also, I just had to shut my father up. So where's the novel? Where's the novel then? There, Dad, there. And years later, he came up with a little, among my father just did everything. And one of the things that he did was magic tricks. Very bad magic tricks, most of them, mainly for children. And he published a little cyclist-styled pamphlet of how to do the most basic tricks you've ever seen, how to do them. About 4 pages. When he'd had it kind of run off on a Gestetner or something, he came to me and went, "You're not the only writer in this."
So, so do you think, Guy, your alter ego, Guy Abelman in Zoo Time was right when he said that the impulse to write is an impulse to change the conditions of your childhood?
Is that what Guy Abelman said?
Guy Abelman said it.
Thank you for reminding me which novel he had. Because you could have tested me. Yes, I think that is it. The first things I wrote when I was quite young were stories of humiliation. The minute I felt that I'd really been shamed, made to look foolish, made to feel foolish, made foolish, I needed to write about it. Not to change, but the interesting thing is when I say to change the circumstances, it wasn't to change what had happened. If anything, the lying came in when I wanted to make it worse. Let's make it worse. Because in the act of making it worse, in the hyperbolizing of shame, you master shame. You show that you can laugh at yourself more than the world can laugh at you, more than the people who humiliated could laugh at you. You could argue that that's the basis for Jewish comedy. I do argue that that's the basis for that great thing we call a Jewish sense of humor. You get in first. You do it better than anybody else. You won't be loved anymore for it. In fact, you'll be hated for it, for being smart and clever. But it's what we do, and it's what I, as a little boy, not knowing that I was doing something which my people did, that's what I was doing. Over showing I had achieved some sort of mastery over shame.
So, in the reading that we've just heard, was wonderful reading. You say that being Jewish both held you back and got you going at the same time.
Yeah.
So, could you maybe unpack that a bit? What
Yes.
do you mean?
Yes. Interminably, I can. Yes. I must have been. I mean, I know that I was, and I won't be the first Jewish artist or Jewish anybody to have a degree of discomfort about being Jewish. I was not brought up to be ashamed of being Jewish or to need to deny being Jewish. We were Jewish. Don't make too much of a fuss of it. My father used to say, don't have to make a fuss of it. Stay stum a bit. Don't run out into the street and say, I'm Jewish, but on the other hand, don't deny it. Stick up for yourself, but keep it down. And I kept it down. And when I thought about being a writer, I never thought about writing about things Jewish. I didn't want to pass myself off as somebody I was not, but I didn't associate the art that I wanted to make with the business of being Jewish. There were not many models of Jewish writers around. I didn't read many Jewish writers. We had Magnolia Street, that rather lovely book, but by Louis Golding, yes, a book about Manchester Jews. That was on the bookshelf, the small bookshelf at home, and maybe I read that. But otherwise, there were no examples of Jewish. The kind of writer those writers into whose ranks I wanted to write myself weren't Jewish. They were Dickens, they were Jane Austen, they were George Eliot, there were people like that. How soon it was writers like that and not younger writers, I don't know. It's something I've lied about so often that I no longer know the truth. I used to say I didn't read children's books, that I don't like children's books, that I don't think children should be given children's books, that I think children should be given late Henry James from a very early age and let them struggle. And I don't know what, I must have read children, but no, I have when people say, who are your favorite children's writers? I can't think of any, but I wasn't reading late Henry James or even early Dickens at that. But I was reading them I certainly read some D.H. Lawrence when I was maybe 13, 14. So by that time I was reading. And D.H. Lawrence, who I also wanted to be like, didn't go with being Jewish or feeling Jewish. So I didn't write. It never occurred to me that I would write about, I wasn't dodging, well, I was, but I didn't feel I was dodging the issue at all. I just thought, as a writer, I wished to belong to some other sort of tradition. And when I started to, apart from my little stories about being ashamed as a boy, when I started to write as a teenager, started to try to write as a teenager and then as a student, it was preposterously miles away from anything I knew. My old joke, which I must have made to you all those years ago, but it was a truth, was that I mentioned late Henry James. I wanted to write like Henry James. And when I went to university, I hoped that going to Cambridge would give me an entree into, if not a Henry James world, then an Evelyn Waugh world, that I would meet titled people. I wasn't a snob, but it would be nice to meet titled people, bring them home to meet my parents. Mummy, this is the Honourable Algernon, and get up off your knees, Ma, just... And I thought maybe I would, maybe even I would meet a girl with a title, and maybe I would inherit her house, and maybe there'd be a little cottage in the garden for my parents. They could come. Just don't mention that you know me, but there was a degree of that, and the stories I wanted to write were those sorts of things. I knew nothing about English country house life. I knew nothing about aristocratic people. I didn't meet any at Cambridge. The Cambridge I went to and the world I moved in, which was the F.R. Leavis world, was full of people like me, grammar school boys, who were as remote from that world as I was. But I went on trying to write like that and getting nowhere, absolutely getting nowhere. And I turned my nose up at the idea of writing about one's own experience. I hated all that. One's own experience. No, the world of the imagination. The world of the imagination was a dead loss for me because what I was imagining wasn't really worth imagining. And it was so, the Jewishness was the avoiding, consciously or not, writing about being Jewish meant that I was denying myself a subject, really. And it was only when I got to Wolverhampton Polytechnic, which I've already mentioned, and I thought, well, now, this is it. They've all come home to roost now. This was like hell. And it shouldn't have been as hellish as it was. It was snobbery again. What am I doing? All the staff of Wolverhampton Polytechnic, we were all Oxford and Cambridge people. We all thought we should have had chairs at Stanford or Harvard or somewhere like that. We all believed that. We taught, it was a very grand course in English literature that we gave to students who didn't really want that. And they wanted something else. They didn't know what, but they didn't want that really. A few did and did well. And it became, I felt that I was an absurd person wanting to feel like that in Wolverhampton, which was, I don't know whether any of you come from it, but in those days anyway, a thoroughly horrible town. It was horrible. And I got out of it as soon as I can, but I made things worse for myself. It seemed the way to do this, the way to go into Wolverhampton, which I saw as a penance for something, for everything I'd done wrong and everything I'd failed to do, make it even worse. I mean, in a way, it's a version of the story in which you exacerbate your shame, make it even worse. So I found the grottiest flat I could find in conditions that were unspeakable. I'm very fastidious about things like bathrooms and all that stuff, Jewishly. Toilet roll, you see, get your own toilet roll. Took my own toilet roll, but I was sharing a bathroom with about 100 other people. I would walk down from my flat with my own toilet. That was my contribution to hygiene. It didn't have proper hot water. I had to get a big kind of kettle installed, and I lived in squalor, really. Not really, I lived in squalor in Wolverhampton and thought, and I just ate curries day and night.
And the contrast here is between, you mentioned Leavis, and F.R. Leavis is the great tradition, as Conrad Dickens, as you said, Lawrence, Henry James on the side. and perceiving the novel as a priestly vocation. I think Henry James called it a sacred calling. And I suppose there's various tensions there, but maybe let's start with, are you still a leader site? Is the novel still sacred?
This novel is still sacred. The novel has never been more sacred. It gets more sacred with every year that passes. I am still a Levicite. I still hold those things that James said. And Lawrence too. Why do you write? Lawrence would say, I write out of a religious sense for the race, as it were. I find it difficult to say that. That's a little grand, but I do feel that. And certainly in a world where, I don't want to go on about social media and things, but I just have to mention it, in a world in which people are educating themselves or learning to, or accustoming themselves to argue and talk and think in that world, then the world of the imagination, and essentially for me, that means the novel is more important than ever. If it's priestly, it's not because you see yourself as ordained with a message. It's not prophetic. Not for me, prophetic in that way. The novel is the great place of exploration. You go into the novel and you don't make statements. We live in a world of statements. The internet has made people think that statements, or I've always hated statements. I don't care what anybody thinks. I think when it comes to what we think, we are abysmal human beings, absolutely abysmal. Ask me what I think and you'd walk, when you might want to walk out of the room now, but if you heard what I think, you'd be out of there. Out of here in seconds. What we think is worthless, but what we find in the act of creativity, what we discover, never mind about ourselves, forget about ourselves. I don't believe in that right to find yourself, right to lose yourself, right to lose, that this idea that, you know, we must find who we are. No, get rid of who we are. And art, all art really is a manner of escape from the limited, miserable, shivering, I think of George Eliot now, self that we are. But the novel is above all, I think, for me. When Lawrence says it's the novel beats everything, it's the one bright book of life. I agree with that. It's the one bright book of life because it takes us out of the unbright world, the cold world of self, into something else. So for me, yes, the novel is all those things and more.
But obviously, Levis's great tradition, as you've said, led you to a cul-de-sac, to Henry James, the country houses. Levis's version of the great tradition of English literature as a whole is steeped in Christianity. I mean, you have to know your New Testament and the Bible, which you do know, to understand English literature. So how far can you run away from the self? From what you were saying, I understand it can't just be about the self. You couldn't write 17 novels if that's what it's about. But how far can you run from that?
The Christianity part isn't a problem, because if the novel is steeped in Christianity, Christianity is steeped in Judaism. You don't go very far listening to people reading Christian thought. It's Jewish thought. Christianity is Jewishness with bits added, some good bits, some really foolish bits.
Yeah.
But I mean, part of our problems, part of the problems of Christian and Jewish relations is the closeness. Families, no one fights harder than, as we know, Jews and Arabs is another case in point, but Jews and Christians, it's like that.
Yeah.
And we don't like what they've done with us, and they don't like where they came from. If they just admit that they learned everything from us, and then got to be, you know, what a different world we would live in now.
Well, Jesus was Jewish, as we know.
Extremely Jewish, extremely Jewish. Yes, I mean, you want an example of a Jewish mind?
No.
Jesus. Insofar as we can get at it, because the Christians have messed around with him, because Paul took him over. But insofar as we can really find what sounds like an authentic Jesus, it's Jewish.
So at university, in the memoir, you talk about you were very much a Levicite, very much a part of that circle. Queen Levis, of course, his wife was Jewish.
Yeah.
and that, I don't know if that was significant or not. But you didn't like George Steiner. Now, George Steiner is from Central Europe. He was championing the Central European Jewish intellectuals. He was a refugee. He was a kind of survivor. But you didn't like Steiner.
No, that was the wrong kind of Jewishness. I mean, I write about that in the memoir, and it is very interesting to me. I've thought about it more and more now. At the time, I thought, I don't like this man. One of the things I didn't like was, you can know too many languages. You can just know a few too many languages. And if you talk to George Steiner for 5 minutes, you heard of 100 novels you'd never ever heard of. And then there come a moment and you think, he's making these up. That's the inventing. I don't accuse him of that. He isn't here to defend himself, as they say on LBC. So, and I'm sure he wasn't making them up. I think what it comes to is that Steiner had the kind of the universalist imagination. He wanted to get everywhere all at once. And I like the thing that people think of as parochial and insular about Lewis. I liked. You get to the big stuff through the little stuff. Yes, you don't get to the big stuff through the big stuff. You get to hot air through the big stuff. You wait for it to come. So when people would say to me, Lewis was narrow and small, he wasn't. He was not. It was not like that to be talked about. You never felt that he was narrow. When you heard him read something, when you heard Lewis read a Hardy poem or read a lie, you wanted him off. Lewis, we saw him 3 or 4 times a week, maybe 3 times a week, and you didn't want to hear him on T.S. Eliot, and you didn't want to hear him on his enemies. But when you heard him talking about the literature that he loved, he just breathed life at it. It was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And to this day, I can hear him. And not just reading Wordsworth, he read beautifully too, and talked about beautifully. But apparently one of his research subjects when he was a student had been the 18th century. And it was marvelous on 18th century essays. So he could make you feel that Addison was exciting. And he used to do Addison. He used to stand there and kind of strike a pose that was meant to be Addison-esque. And God knows what that was like, but we all believed that was Addison. And he spoke and he could do a kind of an 18th century social, and he was wonderful about the limits of the 18th century imagination. There was nothing, he brought the whole canvas of English literature alive. And we were conscious when we were there anyway, times have moved on, but when we were there, we were conscious of the fact that the First World War had not been all that long ago, really. He'd been in the First World War, I think he'd been a stretcher bearer or something, he'd been gassed, but he'd come out with that sense, as did many people, that the First World War had ruined literature. Where were we going to find the vitality of literature, particularly English literature? What was Englishness? Hence his 2 heroes, T.S. Eliot, with whom he argued personally, but as a poet, he loved Eliot, and D.H. Lawrence. These 2 absolute opposites, but both to him spoke of kind of, the Lawrence thing we have come through. Both of them were healers, and there was a sense he gave you a sense really of a literature and a language that had been disabled, and he saw it as his job to do repair work. And what I was doing, feeling that literature had been disabled, I don't know, but the idea of repair work did appeal to me, though I didn't know that that's what I was enjoying so much at the time.
Now, as we've heard, 16 of your novels are published. One is going to be published next year, I'm assuming?
Yeah, about this time next year.
This time next year. And what struck me when I was thinking about this and rereading you is that your novels are very, very different. They range in form and content. From the first novel, Coming From Behind, which came out of Wolverhampton Polytechnic, or as it's called in the novel, Wrottesley Polytechnic, albeit without a campus, but it was called a campus novel. 2 experimental novels. You're actually quite experimental. And
to my surprise, yes, because I've never really liked other people's experimental, but I quite like my own. Yes, and I never thought I was.
Yes. So Jay, for instance,
Yes.
Tea Time. And then there's your Manchester-based novels, Manchester Game, as you say, The Mighty Waltzer, Kaluki Night, Shylock Is My Name. Now, these are all zigzags, and is it a conscious decision to write one kind of novel and then another kind of novel? Because that quite often happens in your career.
Yes, and I say yes. Yes, I like that idea. I like the zigzagging. Is it conscious? No. I don't think now it's time to do a different kind of, maybe every now and then you say, I won't mind, and then you forget about that. I think your imagination just gets tired of going in one direction. And if your imagination is in good health, you're not ordering it around. You're really at its behest, really. And it just does feel enough of that. Because I never know any novel, I vaguely know that I want to write about this vaguely. Beyond that, I don't know much. And usually start the way an artist starts, really, sometimes with just a squiggle. I start with a kind of squiggle, and sometimes you think, no, you've done that squiggle before. There's a coming from behind squiggle. There's a kind of, that kind of hero, the Jewish schlemiel. And when I see the Jewish schlemiel squiggle forming, I think, no, you just can't do that.
I think people said at the time, we want coming from behind 2 and coming from behind 3, and you resisted that.
Yeah. And people wouldn't have liked it anyway. I did have a go at, I thought, and I started another one about 4 novels in called Coming Along Nicely. I thought, this is nice, this can be my trademark. And then and just as I was dying, I would publish Coming to an End. So I had a nice one. But Coming Along Nicely didn't come along nicely. It just felt tired. And particularly if you like jokes, I mean, I do like an urbane and elegant joke in a novel. It's more than a joke, but I like comedy. Obviously, I like comedy and feel that comedy is, for me, very much the vein. You tap the vein of comedy and you find seriousness very quickly, and you find tragedy very quickly too. And I don't think there is a great novelist that isn't also somewhere or other a great comic novelist. I don't think there is. I don't think there is one. But the comedy is dangerous because you are inclined to repeat it, and that's the one. I've never felt if the squiggle reminds me of something more solemn that I've done, that doesn't bother me. It's when I see that the knockabout that I worry.
Yeah.
Look what it did to Woody Allen.
Yeah.
Woody Allen needed to stop. I'm not now talking about the personal life stuff, which is irrelevant. I'm just talking about that particular scene which he kept mining, and that was tired, I think.
Yes. So I can see that you do write very different kinds of novels to refresh your imagination, to keep it interesting for you and for the reader as well. Do you think your novels are read differently by different groups, by men and women, Jews, non-Jews, Brits, Americans? Do you think your novels are read different? Do you have a sense of that, of your different readerships?
Well, I used to have, and it was kind of a bit lurid, really. I mean, at the beginning, the Americans didn't read me at all. And I thought, well, that's because they're sick and stupid. And then I discovered I did have an American readership. And it was a different kind of an American readership and quite a sophisticated readership. And then I thought, Americans are very good readers. It's the Brits. And I went the same way with men and women, really. At the beginning, there was a certain resistance from some women, right? I had this kept being called misogynistic, which instead of dealing with that and just dealing with it and saying, well, show me what. I remember did try to have this out once with what she called Mariella Frostrup, who every time I went onto one of her shows would go, another love your new novel, Howard, shame about the misogyny. Finally, I said, what are you talking about? This is a novel, I can't remember which it was now, but I said, this is a novel in which it's perfectly clear that my heroes, and not me, but my heroes are in love, wildly, impossibly in love. Yeah, but they keep dying, she said, the women keep dying. I said, women die. I'm not a misogynist because I record the fact that sometimes women die, and my heroes are heartbroken about this. You make them die out. You want them to die. And this, I then started to write articles about why you can be misogynist if you want. And I do believe that. There's absolutely no reason why a novelist shouldn't be misogynistic. Be misogynistic. It's not a mark against a novelist that he, because it's likely to be a he in the misogynistic case, it's not a mark against that novelist if he's misogynistic. Misogynistic is not a literary fault. It's a social taste. You can write, you can be a wonderful, great misogynistic writer. Don't ask me to tell you who that is. But in the same way, similarly, anti-Semitism. I don't hold anti-Semitism against her. I wouldn't say it. He's not a great writer because he's anti-Semitic. Celine, who is the filthiest anti-Semite there's ever been, is a fantastic writer. Deal with it. Live with that. Isn't this? It's interesting the fact that people who have objectionable attitudes can also make great art. And sometimes they make great art thanks to those objectionable attitudes. Not always, but that can be the driving force.
Or we could list them all there, Eliot, Green.
Absolutely,
Wall,
absolutely, absolutely.
Dickens even, and Oliver Twist.
Absolutely. But then things changed anyway. I had that fight, and then things changed. And now I kind of when the reviews come in, if I'm in, I change my mind about it. Some books I want to read the reviews of, some books I don't. When I'm in the mood to read the reviews, I keep thinking, please make these by women. Because I now get far better reviews by women than I do because there's a kind of review, this is reviews, there's a kind of boy, not a man, there's a kind of boy out there that reviews for one of these, you know, the TLS or something. TLS can be particularly. Yeah, and they're easily hurt, and they're hurt on behalf of women. You know the man that's hurt on behalf of a woman, the man who is I'm a feminist, the man who tells you he's a feminist. So he's going to find misogyny where there isn't any. And then you read reviews by women. This book is full of terrific blurbs by men. But the best reviews were all by women. All. In fact, I don't think I had one bad review from you won't tell from that. No. But I don't think I had one bad review from a woman for this, and it's changed. And now I just can't wait to be read by.
Yeah, well, one of your best readers, and he's 10 years younger than me, so not so young, but David Bryan has written a book on Howard, and he's very, very good at showing how completely hopeless your male protagonists are, and the idea that somehow they're kind of utterly masculinized, and you know, the alpha males and all of that.
If only I could do one. If only I knew what an alpha male was. Do you know what an alpha male was? Just between ourselves.
Never been alpha myself.
I think one of the great things, I think this is one of the things that distinguishes for me Saul Bellow from Philip Roth is that Saul Bellow, the great figure at the start of the Jewish novel, if you write, is Leopold Bloom, invented by James Joyce, who wasn't a Jew, but he gives you the Jew, and he gives you in that novel, in Ulysses, every reason why, you know, we should, if the main character isn't a Jew, it's probably not going to be. The Jew is your Jew is your perfect, according to Joyce. Doesn't say it like this, but I'll say it for the Jew is your perfect hero because he is acted upon. He's not the actor, he is acted upon. Therefore, he used to be a blotting paper salesman. Never forget that. He's absorbent. And you want a hero to be absorbent. You want a hero to be somebody to whom something happens, who doesn't take himself too preposterously seriously. Because the minute a hero takes himself preposterously seriously, he's not going to see things, and he's not going to be a reliable register of human emotion. Joyce, in Leopold Bloom, we have the perfect Jewish, the paradigm of the Jewish hero. It's picked up, I think, by Saul Bellow. Yeah. It's not picked up by Philip Roth. No. Philip Roth's heroes are all, in the end, Philip Roth is the most marvelous writer, don't get me wrong. But when it comes to this, his heroes are all preposterously right. You know how you often feel in a Philip Roth novel that it's like a court of law. It's a divorce case. Yeah. And you've got to take the man's side because the man's right. because the woman was this and the woman was that and the woman and the man's right. It's not like that in Saul Bellow.
No,
The man's wrong in
it's
Saul
really
Bellow.
interesting that Bellow quite explicitly takes Bloom. Joyce takes Stephen Taylor's. He takes the
Philip Roth.
Yeah. Philip
That's
Roth
interesting.
takes
That's
Stephen
interesting.
Taylor's.
That's
Which is
interesting. It
suddenly
hadn't occurred
occurred
to
to
me.
me.
Hadn't occurred to me. That's
No, in the
it's-
ghostwriter.
course.
Quite explicit.
of course.
Now, you mentioned, well, as we're talking about Americans, you've been championed by young American writers, Shalom Auslander, Jonathan Safran Foer. Now, so are we still divided by a common language, or are we now closer to our American cousins?
I think we're closer. I think they've woken up to the fact that quite interesting things are going on here. I think we do have, the Australians used to call the way they felt about the Brits in Europe, they talked about the cultural cringe. They always felt they couldn't quite measure up. I still think there is a feeling over here that we can't quite measure up to them. I think we can. I think we do. I think we more than measure up to them.
And
But
they say that quite
They do.
explicitly.
They do say that. Yeah. But it's hard to get the Americans to read you in large numbers. That is quite difficult. They want to read because they say quite right, particularly if you're a Jewish writer. We've got our own. That used to be said to me a lot. Yeah, but we've got ours. And I'd say, yeah, but we're doing something quite different. Yeah, but what you're doing, we've done all that. We've done that. We've been there. We've done it. Well, they haven't, in fact, and they haven't done it with the irony that we can bring to bear. But they do feel they've kind of they've passed on that really. But I think that is just maybe starting to change, and they're waking up to the fact that there is a very the English Jewish experience is not the same as the English American experience because they had it so easy, so many of them. And they turned up in America and they were given, and they, I'm not saying it was easy for them it was probably no more easy for them to be, they were no more welcomed into society at the beginning than we were, but they have a massive audience for themselves. And so they have a kind of indulgence towards themselves. And they're slowly waking up.
Well, I think you've broken through the idea that Americans used to look here and, you know, it's all about the royal family and country houses and Englishness, and you've broken through that. And the more I think about it, the more your self-description, you said you're not a British Philip Roth, you're a Jewish Jane Austen, And I think that's a great joke, but actually, as you said earlier, your wonderful, wonderful book on comedy, seriously funny, is I think that's a seriously funny joke that you're a Jewish Jane Austen.
Yeah, well, I made it on the spur. I mean, it was like this. I think it was at the Hay on Wye festival, and someone said, "How do you feel about as the English Philip Roth or something or other?" And I said, "Oh, stop that. Look, it's a great compliment to be compared to him. He is a fantastic writer. Probably there was a time there when you would have said no one writes a better English sentence than Philip Roth, because he was driven by that Jewish, he was driven by that, Bellow too, but Philip Roth was driven by a kind of a cold, almost puritanical need to show Gentiles that the Jew could write a better sentence than they could. What burnt into the mind of that generation of Jewish writers was the Henry James account of going back to America in the 20s and saying, there seem to be a lot of Israelites around here. They're very clever, and there's a lot of vitalistic talk, but how they will, what they will do to the English language, we have yet to see. And Philip Roth says, I'll show you what we do to the English. We'll write it better. And by God, did he write some, I mean, are there some wonderful rolling periods in Philip Roth? And when Philip Roth at his best, he's in a rage or something like this, and the sentences boil up. Absolutely fantastic. So yes, it's wonderful to have been compared to him. But in the end, I did feel I was doing something kind of different. And Philip Roth is not, I'm not sure that Philip Roth ever really liked Jane Austen. I think Philip Roth probably would have felt about Jane Austen the way Lawrence did. And that's wrong, because Jane Austen is incomparable and stern, and her comedy is not soft. I mean, she's one of the toughest critics of her society and of the sexes there has ever been. But mainly what I was doing with that was saying, look, I'm English, and my tradition is the English tradition, not the American tradition.
There is a kind of, I think there's a very small club of incredibly successful and accomplished writers who Henry James almost finished off. I think you're part of that club. Cynthia Osick is another example. Philip Roth. And you had to kind of overcome James to find your own voice.
That's interesting.
Which I think you have done perfectly. But maybe, and the kind of voice that you found, I think if you look at some of your key words or themes, so masochism, loss, disappointment, these are big themes, and I think you've shown that they're big literary themes, biblical themes as well. Has your relationship to them, do you think, mellowed with age? Or have you changed the way you write about these great literary themes?
I think I have dared to be, well, I think I was always serious, but I've dared to be more overtly serious. People that my father's death changed me without a doubt. Until then, really, I mean, I'd not had tragedy in the family or tragedy nearby. And he died at 72, so it was not that big a tragedy, but I felt the loss of him greatly. And I thought, I'm different now as a consequence of this. I can talk about loss now. I could never understand how people to whom nothing had happened would dare. I mean, the little old ladies who live in Hampshire, and by whom I don't mean Jane Austen, and write thrillers and go bang, bang, and they're killing. How do you write about? I can't, for example, you can check through my work if you like, but I don't think you'll ever find a gun in any of my novels. I wouldn't know how to write about. I just feel this is false. You don't have to know about everything you write about, but some things are too far away, and a gun is too far away.
You have to go off. So.
Exactly. Oh, what was that? But tragedy, I felt I didn't feel I had the right to tackle until then, and then and then when you get older, you are face to face with your own tragedy. And once you're face to face with your own tragedy, you know what seriousness. You feel you can be as serious as you want to be. So it wasn't that I became more serious, but I started to strike and wanted to strike more tragic notes because I felt more tragic. Was that really?
Would Live a Little be part of that? More mellow, perhaps, or
in Live a Little, I wanted to imagine what at the end could you say you've done? What in the end could you say you've achieved? What could you say that life has amounted to? So I have a main character whose life has been nothing, absolutely nothing. And then he meets an older, I mean, these are people in their 90s who, they fall in love. They fall in love in a manner. And they want to just look at what has life. She's had a hugely varied life, lots of lovers. He hasn't because of some disability of his, because of some mental disability of his. He hasn't. And I wanted to just get what's that moment really? What's the? No. So the deathbed thing.
yes.
What now? What's it for? And the novel I've just finished, which is called from a Philip Larkin poem, An Arundel Tomb, What Will Survive of Us is Love, takes love into late middle and early old age, younger than Live a Little. Because that's serious. I certainly don't now want to write about getting the hots for people.
Yeah.
I'm not saying what I wrote was ever the story of my life or how I felt about those things, but I was closer.
Yeah.
I was close. When you write about 40, most of life is behind you anyway.
Yeah.
So, but once it gets further behind you, you then start thinking about, well, what are other things, and what matters, what else matters, or what matters more. So there's but along with that new somberness and sobriety, if you like, is a new kind of humor as well, a more excruciating, a sweeter kind of humor, but also grandeur.
And what's
I'm looking
the-
for grandeur. that's-
Have you a title for your new novel?
Yes, what will survive of us?
What will survive?
What
of
will
us?
survive of us? And then we're arguing now about just what will survive of us or what will survive of us. The actual full quote is love. And how that goes, I'd kind of like to see what will survive of us and then is love on the next line. But we can take a vote on that. Really.
Well, we've got something to look forward to.
Well, I hope. I think it's good. I think it's good.
Well, I think, as I said, I think you're still at the height of your powers. There's a special issue of European Judaism on your work, which I think you've got a leaflet for. There's lots and lots of criticism out there, but most importantly, there's so much to read, so much to reread. It's a pleasure. I actually said in my introduction that your novels should be on the National Health Service because they should be prescribed because they really are incredibly uplifting.
Well, then along with those should go your essays on them, which have helped me to be uplifting and which have certainly uplifted me. So,
well, thank you so much. And just been a sheer pleasure this evening. Thank you so much, Helen.
me too. No, thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
And my understanding is that Howard, I guess Howard, that Brian might answer questions too, have agreed to answer a few questions. And we'll do a double act and Claire will be monitoring those who've joined us online and make sure that they also get the opportunity to ask questions. So you put questions out in the chat probably, and Claire will feed them in or in the room. And we have a couple of student volunteers, I think, a student volunteer.
And Brian will need your mic.
Oh, and we'll need to de-mic Brian. So, who would like to ask the first question?
We have questions actually already in Zoom to
Well,
give
yeah,
you the
go
time.
first.
Mike Ward is asking, did you ever wish to be a comedian, Howard?
Does that mean I'm not?
No, I think it's probably reacting to the fact that you had some great zingers in your comments to it.
Yes, I did. But even more than I wanted to be a comedian, I wanted to be a lyric tenor. And that didn't happen. I wanted to be Mario Lanza. And then I think I have just once or twice I've kind of tried. I've tried to do a talk in which is much more like on my own, much more like stand-up comedy. And it's not good. It's really not good. So yes, but I've failed. The one I would like, I mean, it's not I would like to have been, since he's just died, one can mention him, Barry Humphries, a subversive, not a comedian. He wasn't a comedian. That was art he was doing. Dame Edna Everage is one of the, is as great a creation, I think, as anything you will find in a novel. And when Dame Edna Everage, there were some moments when she would come onto the stage and dance or describe something hideous that she'd done, and you felt as if hell itself had opened. It was just fantastic. And you felt this release that you could say anything, that you could feel anything, that the whole being a human being had been loosened. And that's ideally what a comedian would do, but who could do that the way he could do it. So if you can't be Barry Humphries, don't bother. And I can't be Barry Humphries any more than I can be Mario Lanza. And it's sad for me. But thank you for the question.
Thanks, Mike. Question in the room? Yes. And then over to the left.
So
Yeah, sorry.
yeah,
Go.
try to speak
Hello,
loud.
better?
Yeah.
Yes. You mentioned Joyce and Ulysses, and I wondered whether you thought there were other examples, if any, of an ability for a Gentile writer to write Jewishness in a kind of comprehensive, realistic, interesting way.
Can't think of any. George Eliot gives it a go, doesn't she, in Daniel
We'll
Deronda?
take one day and then we'll go back.
And if anybody had the breadth of sympathy to do it, she did. But it takes more than sympathy. I mean, it takes what Joyce had was not sympathy; it was something else. It was he got it. He got under the skin of a Jew because Jews had got under his skin. And that's a very rare thing. I can't think of anybody. Can you think of anybody? I can't think of anybody who's done it.
No. Would you say Nabokov or?
I would say no.
Have you got any?
My PhD is on Nabokov and wondering this question.
Oh, really?
Can you pass the mic back because nobody's answering? Her
So-
PhD is about Nabokov.
And a question over there, and then we'll.
Well, I wish you luck with it.
Please.
I noticed you didn't mention Bernard Malamud. Do you not like him?
I do like him. There's something I can't quite get the voice of Malamud. I like the idea of Malamud. I'm touched by the idea of someone who had a quieter genius than Roth and Bellow, and was a bit squeezed between them. I mean, there's something sad about that, I think. But I
not
haven't, and I really like some of the stories.
But not in the Fixer.
Yeah, yes, but I don't. The Fixer is which is the baseball, but that's the natural, isn't
The
it?
Fixer is in Russia, the one who's in prison and will not even take the opportunity to escape solitary
Yes.
confinement because
Yes.
he's innocent of a blood libel accusation.
Yes, I like it, but it doesn't find a way into me quite. The one who I think is nearest to that and who does get to me is Singer.
I.B. Singer, I also
Yeah.
was going to ask you.
I think they're wonderful, and it might be that in time, when people kind of come to survey that period, that extraordinary flowering of Jewish literature in America at that time, it's astonishing, really, that Singer will be seen to be the really towering genius, I think.
We'll take a couple online, Claire.
So Cynthia Minder is wondering about the Jewish Americans versus Jewish British sensibility. Could some of it be the result of, first, proximity to anti-Jewish sentiment in Europe, and second, American Jewish participation in the building of American society from the start, and British Jewish exile from their society and return after 300 years?
That's quite tough, isn't it? That's a tough question, but I think yes, yes. I
Final
think,
year exam question.
I think. Are you allowed a one answer question? I think it is that. But it's interesting because the Americans want to. People like Roth want to go straight to Kafka. They want to get there. They want it. We don't go straight to Kafka, or I don't. I go. Even as a Jewish writer, I am spoken more directly to by Jane Austen than I am by Kafka. And I think the mix of Jew and English bewilders the Americans, bewilders me, and I'm in it. And I think that they can't quite understand what they like is to have. I mean, it's almost like the Steiner thing, the Steiner-Levy thing. They want the big gestural leap back to the great Jewish metaphysical writers of Europe. But you don't have to be a Jewish writer to affect the imagination of another Jewish writer. If I had world enough and time, I could imagine trying to write an interesting paper on Jane Austen's Jewish influence on me.
Yeah,
Another question from Peter Brook. Do you ever think about the afterlife of your characters? Where is Sefton Goldberg now?
No, because they don't have an afterlife and they don't have a forelife. They don't exist. There was a famous essay written by Professor L.C. Knights, then at Bristol University, that took on the whole business of, Shakespeare's characters having a life beyond the plays. And the essay was called, How Many Children Has Lady Macbeth? because people used to say she made that speech. Could she have made that speech if she'd had children? If she had had children, they don't exist outside that. Macbeth doesn't exist outside that page for a second, just doesn't. And I'm not comparing myself to Shakespeare, but in my more modest way, my characters don't exist outside the page. They're dead. They live at that moment and then they die. And that's why we're often so upset when we finish a good novel, even if the novel doesn't end tragically, because we know it is a kind of tragedy because they're over. But what's it now is, well, it's the Tempest, isn't it? What's it over? What's over? The pageant, what is it? The Lion, Prospero's. Thank you. That'll do. Yeah, now Rebels now, yeah. The
Heavens, here we are in Southampton Humanities. The letters down happily there if we could go up the Shakespeare.
By roads. We should.
Things are even worse in the universities than I'd read about.
Still do teach Shakespeare to some extent.
Our rebels now are ended.
Yeah.
Time for a question or two. Yes, in the middle, in pink.
When you're writing, are you a very secretive writer, or are you sharing your work with other people, getting opinions and
Only
talking
my
about
wife.
your own work?
I show my wife, but often not for a long time. I don't go each day, look at this, look at this, look at this. I share a problem, but I am secretive. Yes, I am a very secretive. I'm not one of those writers that, loves joining other groups. I'm astonished that there's some writers can't wait to go along with their pieces of paper and read things out. No, no, no. But if the only person who ever sees anything that I'm doing is my wife, and she's not asking to see it. She's not saying, "What have you written today? What have you written?" But sometimes I feel one of those lurches, and the question I want to ask always when there's a kind of lurch in confidence is, "What is this about? What's this for?" And every time I feel, I'll say, "I just don't know what this is about. What's this about?" And that's when I will show her and hope she doesn't say nothing. The answer is nothing.
We won't ask for a corroboration there, but there was a question coming just on the end there.
I'd like, if I may, to just divert for a moment onto the industry with a question about a mystery. How is it that the network, the underground network of publishers and editors and maybe even authors allowed 2 books with the title Mother's Boy to be published within 48 hours of one another?
Weird, that wasn't it? Yes. Carelessness. Or lack of interest. I don't know.
It wasn't contrived.
Well, why would we have contrived it? There was nothing to gain.
Yes.
No, it was very strange.
No.
I don't know how he felt. And in the end, I thought, well, that's just it. But it wouldn't have happened. You're quite right. It's a question about the industry, and I don't believe it would have happened 25 years ago. There are different kinds of people now. When I first started writing, there were still old-fashioned publishers who loved books, who loved writing, who just relished what you'd done if you were any good, relished what other writers did. And I don't see that kind of person around anymore. Now publishers got taken over by businesses. They had to turn profits. They've always had to turn a profit, but more than ever, that became essential. And I don't think they're run now at the highest editorial level by the kinds of people. It feels like a generation that's over now, those great publishers with a high ideal of what they were doing, and never mind how many they sold.
We've got many questions online, but there's one particularly that I think, particularly in the light of the Diana Abbott statement, might be worth reading.
Are the Irish just Jews who do better in the rain?
By the way, my mother's born in Ireland, so.
It's such a good question, I don't know what it means. Yeah, it looks good, but then when it's made Kerry, I'm not sure it was. we've given the name, that's Bryan
In the rain.
Walsh.
Brian Walsh.
There's a
asking-
fantastic joke there that I
asking for a
don't
friend.
quite get. I
Sorry,
feel I'm on the
asking-
outside of
asking for a
something.
friend. Maybe we need to take that one offline.
You know, when Joyce tried to go into Switzerland, they wouldn't let him in on the grounds that he was Jewish.
I didn't know that.
And he just started laughing. So,
How fantastic.
We
But it was
have-
nothing to do with the rain.
it was all to do with Leopold Bloom and nothing to do with the rain.
We will take a last question there, and I think we'll be coming to the end.
And we have maybe a last
Oh.
one.
Good evening.
Hello.
Talking earlier of the extract from the book that you read was absolutely delightful.
Thank you.
Have you ever thought of doing talking books so that on travels we can listen to you and the humour and content?
Well, I mean, this book, Mother's Boy, I have done the audio book for. And I've done audio, I've never audio booked a novel. I don't think I could. I've never been asked to. I don't think I could. I don't think I could do the voices and things. But where it's me speaking, distinctly me speaking, yes. And I've done two of my. I was a columnist for the Independent for many years, and I published two collections. One is called Whatever It Is I Don't Like It, and the other is The Dog's Last Walk. And both of those are on audio and with me reading, but not a novel, no. Not a novel.
I'll contradict myself. We've got just one question. We'll go online, and then that probably brings us to the end.
Yeah, from Philip Glassbauer, who is noting that it always seems as if you feel very deeply about the subjects you broadcast on for BBC Radio 4. So do they come to you from passion?
Yeah, when they don't, you can tell. I found those to be, these are I think a point of view, which are broadcast on Friday night when nobody listens, and Sunday morning when a few people came. And I always wanted to do them from the days when, what's it called, Alistair Cook did them. I thought I could do these. I'd like to do these. And then Clive James took over, and I thought, and I could do those too. And then I let it be known. I don't know who to, but I let it. Someone found out that I would like to do them, and I was asked. And then it's become a pool of people. So I'm doing something I've always wanted to do. I like them. They're the hardest things I've ever written. They take me ages, and I write about 4 pieces that don't work. And I don't know why. It's something to do with the responsibility of the words and the voice, and the feeling that you're reaching into the ears and minds of people at that moment. It's not just your language, it's your voice and everything. And they frighten me in the sense that I feel they've really got to be good. So I work on them and I work on them and I work on them. So if they're good, it's partly because I work so hard. I mean, I really do work hard on them and worry about them. And I'm conscious that when you're scratching around for something, that's when mine are no good. I'm thinking, well, I'm going to do an interesting sky this morning. A sky, I'll describe the sky, and then I'll think about other skies I've seen, and I'll keep going. And sometimes I read them to my wife, and that's when I get no, it's not working. No, it's not. It's not that she doesn't say it's not working. She doesn't say anything. It's the most terrifying thing. You read the thing, and there's this silence in the room, and then I might get. You hate it? No, I'm not saying I hate it. And that's when I know, no, get rid. And in a way, it's the confirmation of what I know. And I've found that the best ones have to come really from a well of, passion, the person's right who said that, and anger. And my angry ones work better than my other ones, I think. But then you have to worry about being monotonously, you don't just want to be a grumpy old person. So I don't do that many. And sometimes when they ask me to do one on a subject, I say no, because unless it's come from here. Yes, but I'm glad. I mean, I'm always pleased when people listen to them, because they're so costly.
So we'll end at that point. Thank you, Howard and Bryan, so very much.
Thank you, Bryan. Thank you. Thank you.
And I will leave the very last word to our director, Claire.
Thank you, really, Brian and Howard. I think that we all really enjoyed listening to your both light and very deep thoughts about your writing and about literature and about life. It's all a bit thought provocative and a bit politically not correct sometimes, but we all loved it. So another round of applause for you.
I do. Thank you very much to the Parks team for organising it.
Yes.
And you're not done yet. I think there is a reception.
And we
And
will
there is wine. That was what I thought you were.
into the North Corridor
Well, thank
for
you.
a drink.
So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.